Hi, and welcome to the Better Minneapolis podcast. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast and the newsletter, and consider becoming a paid subscriber if you appreciate what we're doing here. Thank you.
Hi, camera.
Hi, welcome to Better Minneapolis. Today I'm here with
Eric Harris Bernstein, running for the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Yep. Very excited to have him on here today. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, why you chose to run?
Yeah. So I got in this race when Sam Priest-Stinson decided not to run again. So she's one of the two incumbents, Steve Brandt being the other. And I am a professional policy wonk, tax policy wonk, and I am just very enthusiastic about the importance and the potential of the collective investments we do together, whether it's parks, street reconstruction, basic infrastructure, all of those things. I think those things are what make Minneapolis a great place to live. And I've been studying and organizing and working in my professional life about issues related to public investment and fiscal policy for over 10 years now. So it's a big fascination of mine, a passion of mine. And so when Sam decided not to run again, I thought, wow, that's really an important office, but like one that people don't know about, and maybe one that's a little bit under leveraged. We have a lot of energetic debates in our city about how the police are working and about all kinds of hot button issues. But I think we don't talk enough about, what value are we getting for our tax dollars and how can we get more value for our tax dollars? The conversation around taxes often boils down to, candidates promising over who's going to raise your taxes less or who's going to cut your taxes the most. And I understand where that instinct comes from, but it's not a very constructive attitude about how could we make a better city for everyone, especially when we have things like an unsheltered population that is creating public health and public safety concerns and are, also just represents a tragedy of human rights, in my opinion. And so how can we work together to constructively solve some of these things and have a more productive conversation about the money that we raise and spend together through our city government? So, kind of a long-winded answer, sorry.
Okay. It's all right. It just so happens that today, I forget where I was reading it, maybe the Reformer, they were talking about, kind of preparing people for their statements, their property tax statements and tax increases and the levies, and explaining, part of it is Hennepin County, part of it is going to be Minneapolis,
right.
And it gets complicated. I know I don't fully understand it, but if, say, the levy is 7.9. I'm not sure what's proposed yet.
7.8. You almost had it.
So 7.8. That doesn't necessarily mean that my specific rent or property taxes on my home are going out up 7.8. There's all kinds of other factors like how much commercial rent is being taxed and property values and all kinds of stuff.
I can explain a little bit about that, just the mechanics of it. And I have a video of this. If you're on Instagram or Facebook, you look up EHB for BET or search for Eric Harris Bernstein, Board of Estimate and Taxation. The video I did basically explains how a levy works, and it's worth explaining that because it's not how other taxes work. Sales taxes, income taxes, you've got a fixed percentage, and you multiply that percentage by the base. So if you're buying some nuts and bolts at the hardware store, 6.875% on that, that's your sales tax bill, right? And so your sales taxes go up with the prices. Similarly, income taxes, it's like we've got different brackets. You pay 5.85% on your first $40-some thousand of income, and then you pay 3.575, whatever it is. So we have those set rates, and if you make more money, you pay more taxes. If prices go up, you pay more taxes. Property taxes don't start with a rate, but it's a total amount of money that the city says it's going to raise in order to fund the budget. And so it's around like $700 million right now in that ballpark. And so that,
I'm sorry, what's $700 million?
That's the levy, the total amount of property tax revenue that the city's going to collect.
Okay.
And so then they take that total amount of money and they spread it across the base, which is all property in the city. And it's a little more complicated than this, but basically everyone pays in proportion to the share of total value that they own. So you're spreading that total levy across the tax base. And so to your point, they raise it 7.8%, But not everyone gets a 7.8% increase because some people's values have gone up relative to the total and some people's properties have gone down relative to the total. And so it's that new proportion that matters. So if you're in, like, for example, some of the higher earning, higher wealth parts of the city where property values are rising, and then compared to downtown where commercial values are falling, your taxes are gonna go up more than 7.8% because not only have we increased the levy 7.8%, but also now you represent a relatively larger share of the total value of property in the city. So that creates a lot of confusion and frustration about property taxes because people don't really know what to expect and we have to pay them in these big chunks and things like that. But that's how the levy works. And there's benefits and drawbacks to that approach. It's more stable because we pick a number and we're like, we're going to collect this much revenue. If it were a percent and then commercial values plummeted, all of a sudden the city would have a huge budget hole. This way, it creates more increases on different people at different times, but the revenue is more predictable, which is important because we do have to fund maintaining our infrastructure. We have to fund public safety, we have to fund parks and all of these things, and people don't like it when we cut those things. So
right.
Property taxes are complicated and they're very unpopular, but part of that unpopularity comes from just being complicated too.
So just to kind of step back a little bit and break down how the whole process works. So the mayor has to come up with a budget every year, right? And it has to be balanced, right? Like you can't...
Not the federal government. We can't just print money.
Right. Yeah. So he comes up with a budget, and that just happened in, I think, is it September?
It was about a month ago.
Yeah. And then it goes to the council, and they do a bunch of hearings with the different departments and stuff, and kind of, I don't know, I guess, see if they're on target or why they need the money they're asking for. And then they come up with a list of amendments, and then it goes back to the mayor. But at what point, I guess, does that work go to the BET, and then they...
I have to confess, I don't know the exact timing, but the role of the BET is to approve or not approve a maximum property tax levy. So the mayor asked for 7.8%, and the BET can say, okay, well, we will approve this 7.8% levy increase, or they can say, no, that's too much. It should only be 6.8%. Or they can say, we think it's not enough, and we're going to actually approve a levy increase of up to 8.5%, let's say. So that's one of the major functions. That's the major function of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, is to approve the maximum property tax levy increase. And within that maximum, the mayor and the city council can approve anything up to that amount. And the reason that it exists, this is helpful to explain, I think. We have right now two concurrent levies. The park board has its separate levy authority, and the city has separate levy authority. And so,
and the county does
the county does too, but that's not under the auspices of the BET. So we had the city and the park board, and then once upon a time we also had the libraries. So we had these three different levy authorities, and they created the Board of Estimate and Taxation so there to be a place where all of these groups came together with directly elected representatives. That's one of the positions that I'm running for. And to make sure that when you combine those three levies, that it's not overall too much of a property tax increase for Minneapolis residents. So it was like, we've got a lot going on between these three different levies and bonding, which is borrowing, for these different enterprises. So let's have a joint, sort of fiscal oversight body. That's why we have the BET. But the libraries are now run by the county, so they're a separate thing. But the BET still oversees the park board and the city budget.
And that board, I know I'm not going to get this right. There's like 4 city councilors on it, or is that right?
2 city council members, the mayor, a park board member, and 2 residents elected directly.
Okay, all right. And why I mean, it's kind of an unusual office. What motivated you?
A lot of other cities don't have it, yeah. What motivated me? Well, I got into it a little bit in the beginning, but yeah, I've just been both interested in and passionate about the importance of public investment, and especially in Minneapolis, good parks, good street infrastructure, like good urban design. These are all things that make Minneapolis a special place to live, and I think that right now our politics is sort of hostile to that notion, right? We talk a lot about the burden of taxation, but we don't talk very much about the promise of public investment. And I became interested in this role because it seemed like a good place to talk about that with people. And I have to say, I was absolutely right about that. It has been wonderful campaigning for this office.
Yeah. What sort of questions do you get when you're out?
Well, people are very interested to just hear that it exists because they haven't. Maybe I would say 8 out of 10 people probably haven't heard of it. And I also think, they're interested in understanding why, for homeowners, why property taxes fluctuate in these kind of unpredictable ways. They're interested in learning about why does commercial values affect my property values in this residential neighborhood miles away. And also interested just generally in the conversation about, the importance of public investment and how we can get better value for our tax dollars. I think it's been really nice. I haven't talked to one voter who disagrees with me when I say that even though we all want our taxes to be affordable, we have to maintain our public spaces and we have to invest in essential services. And we have to continue to think of new services to invest in to address challenges that we're having, like unsheltered homelessness, like youth crime, and just also the need for more youth programming and enrichment and things like that.
The BET doesn't get to decide
where it goes. No.
Right.
But I mean, there are questions like a couple of years ago, they considered a youth levy. And so creating this new levy for youth programming, and the BET would have had to approve the space to make that possible. And actually the board voted it down, and this was like 2018. And come couple years later, we have a pretty concerning rise in youth crime. And so like, even though the BET does not get to decide what we spend money on, it has important influence over a lot of those decisions because it's approving or disapproving the amount of money we have. And then there's also the informal role of someone who's elected to that office. I don't think I'm going to be shy about talking about where I think our money is getting really good value and where I think our dollars are getting less value, and how we can, get better value out of the dollars we spend.
So how do you, I don't know what all the data is that you get to look at, but I know when I've tried to go into the city and look at, different department budgets and stuff, it gets pretty murky. There's like big line item, so like how would the BET understand, like, okay, we're putting 20 million towards affordable housing. Are we getting our value for it?
Right.
Like, how can you calculate that out?
It's a great question. We could talk about that one question for a very long time. I would say, just first and foremost, starting with a better understanding of our assets and our long-term fiscal position. I would like the city to create an accrual accounting system. Right now, cities... I have a feeling
you're going to lose me.
Okay, I'll try and explain it very simply. Right now, most governments in the United States, they think primarily about cash flow. So we have this much money coming out and we're spending this much money. But that leaves out all of the assets that you own, the way they're depreciating, the potential that they have to earn income, and our future liabilities like public pensions and things like that, as well as our expected future revenues. And so we don't, when you have, like, if you're managing your household finances, you own a home, you own some retirement accounts, you own these different things, you own a car, and when you think about your finances, you don't just think about how much money you made that week or that month and how much you spent, but you also think about, am I saving for retirement? Is my house going to need a new roof? Do I have assets that are appreciating that mean that actually like I have more money than it looks like on paper from the last 2 months or whatever? And the city doesn't think that way. But the city owns enormous numbers of assets, huge amounts of assets in real estate, in, machinery and things like that we don't bring into our budgeting process. So I would like the city to do more thorough long-term fiscal planning. That's one thing. And I think I'd also like the city to look harder at its. So the question you asked was like, how do you even begin to break down the budget, right? And I think that we should be looking harder at what I would call base budgets. So every year you pass a budget and the conversation becomes, oh, we're going to add, we're going to increase this funding 5%, that funding 2%, we're going to cut this, whatever. But you're only talking about the changes that you're making at the margins. You're not talking about where is the base of all this money moving year after year. We need to get better at that. And that's true at the state level. That's true in a lot of things. That doesn't mean we do zero-based budgeting. Like it's not productive to come back and say every year, we're going to re-examine every dollar we spend. But over time, we should be having a more in-depth conversation about the fact that, like, for example, we spend almost 50% more money on contracted services than we do on public sector employees. So if we're paying private firms to do all that work year after year, does it not make sense to grow our public sector workforce in some places so that we can in-house that expertise and save money over the long run and build up, more capacity to do the things we need to do? So
I've wondered about that a lot myself, because when you watch a city council meeting or even just look at the agenda, it's just like a big menu of money going out the door to a lot of contractors, whether it's people building roads or
managing parking ramps, doing design, doing all kinds of things. And I think the city has done some good work on this. I heard that they brought their road designers in-house after a certain point because they realized they had enough money to do that, and that the design services were very costly to outsource. But if you brought them in, you could get a lot more value. I'm very interested in learning, and I think it's learning about that, but I think it's going to take time. We're not going to come in, no matter what the administration is, no one's going to come in and, throw everything out overnight and come up with a new plan. But from my point of view, we're not moving that conversation at all. And so I'm running for this office. Honestly, my biggest inspiration for running for this office is because I feel like we need to start that conversation. We have a lot of challenges coming down the pike. Falling property values is the most obvious thing, but long term, we also have these demographic changes where we are going to have fewer young people and more retired people. That is going to create a lot more costs and needs in our city and across the country. And so if we don't have really good ideas about how to get more value out of our dollars and how to invest in long-term durable structures to support people and communities, I think we and a lot of other cities are going to be in very difficult position. But if we do it right, then we have a leg up on other places in the region, and we might attract more people, and then we have more of a tax base to do more investment and invest in new things that people want and need, like childcare or, more affordable housing and things like that.
Yeah, it will definitely be interesting what with, federal budget cuts. I mean, the one that comes to mind is like the Medicaid cuts, the SNAP. How is the city in the county too? Like I never read anything good about HCMC, and it's like so. And then so to hear them cutting healthcare stuff, and then knowing that some of these programs are already,
in difficult position.
Right. So you seem to know a lot about the history of what's happened with this board and things like that. I mean,
not as much as I should, but I'm piecing it together slowly. It's hard to run for the office and prepare to have potentially the office, because it's like I really if ideally I would just be studying a lot more, watching a lot more old meetings from the past, reading stories and looking at the budgets in detail, but honestly I got to get out there and talk to voters right now. So part of me is excited for a time when that's over and hopefully I've won, and then I can have some time to prepare for holding the office and educating myself even more. But I've done okay. Sorry, I cut you off.
So have you had a chance to talk to Sam? I mean, to get a good sense of what the office is about, kind of, and or maybe some of the other
Yeah.
members?
Well, so Sam dropped out because she is sick. And so I have met with her and talked to her on the phone, and she's been a wonderful resource, and I look forward to talking to her more. But, I'm trying not to bug her too much.
Yeah.
But I talked to Steve Brandt a lot. I met with Bob Fine, actually, who, I've been telling more people to vote. I've been telling people to vote for Eric and Steve. But I met with Bob, and honestly, I really like Bob a lot. And Bob has a lot of important thoughts about how the city should manage its finances better, which is one of the nice things about this race and this conversation about fiscal policies. Like, at the end of the day, we're either going to manage our money well or not. And we might disagree about, should we create a new revenue source? Should we spend more or a little bit less? But it's like, everyone should agree that the money we have should be spent well. And Bob has interesting ideas about how the city should approach certain questions better. So I have been working in public policy for over 10 years.
Yeah. Did I see you write for the Reformer?
I do. I have a column for the Reformer
Okay.
as well, which I haven't been able to write since I started this campaign because it's kind of a murky, but hopefully afterwards I can resume. But yeah, so I've been working in public policy for over 10 years, and I've had a really wonderful, rewarding career. And I think part of the way I have been able to piece that together is I've always been really interested in getting, just talking with folks who have done things I haven't, who have studied things I haven't, and asking a lot of questions. And so talking to not just my opponents, Bob and Steve, but also to a lot of city council members who are, have really interesting ideas and point out really important patterns that they see that they want us to work on more together. Talking, even to Jacob Fry, who I have not been supportive of, but I told him, if you are the mayor, I will work with you. Like, it is in our best interest to work together for a stronger budget, no matter who's in office. And a lot of people are really there for that conversation, which has been really cool.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to be running in a race that's not politicized in the same way as the city council races
Yeah,
are.
it's hard,
or the mayor's
it's hard to
races
politicize it when most people don't understand it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But I don't know.
it-
Once I've been in the office for a little while, maybe that will end. We'll see how people react.
it's not a full-time position.
No, it's not even really a part-time. I mean, it's
And is it
1 or 2
even
meetings
paid?
a week,
I don't
depending
know
on
if
the
it's
time of
paid.
year. I believe it's like about $5,000 a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
so not a ton, not a ton of money, but
And so you'll keep your existing role?
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
we
I'll keep-
talk about what that is? or-
yeah, I run a coalition of labor unions and grassroots organizations that do policy and advocacy at the state level on tax and budget issues. And so I've been doing that I was policy director for 2.5 years, and now I've been running the place for almost 3 years.
So is that kind of lobbying or?
I do lobby a little bit at the state, but I also do a lot of kind of political organizing. I go out and I educate union members about budget and tax issues. We do a lot of kind of comms work, just research, like 501c3 research and policy analysis sort of stuff. So it's a mix of things like that.
So are there any sort of big budget errors you think that have been made so far that you've come across as you're studying the?
There's a couple examples. I mean, I think that I'll give you a big category of error. The biggest one, in my opinion, is that we, like a lot of other cities and states, like a lot of governments in the United States, have gotten into the habit of trying to spur the economic development that we want by giving handouts to and incentives to developers. And I think there is a role for public-private partnership in creating economic development that is advantageous to the city in the long run. But the idea that we should give out tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidy and incentive to private developers with no expectation of return for the public is ludicrous to me.